We have everyone here. There. Acknowledge the traditional custodians of our beautiful lands and our surroundings.
Almighty God, we ask you to bless this council, allow it to be an agent of change, direct and prosper its operations to the honouring of your welfare of the people.
We gratefully acknowledge the men and women of the Navy, Army and Air Force who made the supreme sacrifice in the preservation of Australia's freedom and democracy. We also proclaim our gratitude to those who returned to us.
As with the previous meeting, we have two apologies, and that's Councillor Lee and Councillor Hales. Move on to the first item, agenda, the major event application with Electric Day concert. I'm happy to do this on block. Most of station two, someone like to. Thank you, and Schofield seconding that. Do either of you want to speak to it?
I want to say what a great initiative this is to be approached again for such a major event. I was very pleased to see this come to us. Based on the organisation of the Red Hot Summer Tour, I think this can only be another very successful event on our calendar, and also the feedback from the previous event they organised was all positive, not a single negative comment. So very happy to recommend this go forward.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Schofield, did you want to speak to it? Does anybody want to speak to it? Councillor Robertson? Yes. Can you put your microphone on, please?
Comment on part 4. The council's pre-budget commitment of $5,000 to support dust suppression in the reserve. Is that really the end of the costs to the council? Because I have a couple of questions here in relation to the operations here on page 5. We're opening up or we're keeping in play the public tours, playgrounds, etc. on Kent Reserve for several days there. That I presume will need to be cleaned more regularly, perhaps several times a day, because there will be a lot of people who will come along to try and catch part of the music from this program, and the toilets are going to get used, and we need to put on our best display.
Sure. When you said they'll be open for a couple of days, Councillor Robertson, it's just that one day on Saturday the 5th,
Yep.
Between 12:30 and 9:30 p.m.
Yep. But since we're talking about the costs here, I'm wondering if those are the only costs we are actually going to be incurring for this program to go ahead.
Sure. Mark Prisabilla is here and he may be able to answer that. Mark?
Just through the mayor, that is correct. With regard to the toilets for the last event, we were concerned that there might be a usage of the toilets on that reserve. The concern was more so the provision of enough toilet paper in that toilet block. In the end, the usage of the toilets was minimal. There are toilets on site. I think there's toilets on site to service the patrons.
Yep.
And the desire of the patrons at the time was to get into the site, not to loiter outside. There were some members of the public sitting outside enjoying the concert, but certainly was more than adequate for the toilet
Yep.
needs, and the toilets are serviced on the weekend, I
Yep.
believe, as well. So the existing services would support the use of the toilets.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Robertson, anything else?
Yes, I think it's great that there's a bus service being provided from Adelaide for the concert. That's really, really smart. The cost, cost for the road closures, that's being met by the event organisers. Notice they're involved in that. Are they actually doing it, or council is going to be doing part of the road closure?
Sure. So through the mayor, yes, that is correct. The organisers will be paying for the traffic control connected to the event. You may recall that, and the organisers have indicated they'll be paying for it. So that's only council's role to approve those closures. You may recall the previous Red Hot Summer Series, the applicant had applied through our regular grants program and received funding to support the costs of the road closures for the March previously Red Hot Summer Series. The applicant, as you'll see in the next report, hasn't committed either way, whether to apply for the Red Hot Summer Series again through that grants program. So they may, for next financial year's Events and Festivals grant program, apply for council support for that event. But for this particular event, all that they are requesting is the council put some measures in place to address the dust on the site. And so you'll see in the second report that also provides a contribution out of our existing grants program. So it's not actually technically new money in the draft budget. It's just utilising the funds that have already been provisionally allocated in the draft budget for next financial year.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Kemp and then Councillor Glassbrook.
It's interesting. Recommendation 4 coming out of winter. I'm not quite sure we want $5,000 for dust unless we have a very, very dry winter, but I'm not sure that will happen. So I guess it's just one of those situations that if we don't use it, we don't spend it, it won't be used. A question about the cleanup. In here spoke about the Victor Harbour Rotary Club picked up the plan. Who authorised that, and did it go out for a bit of a process for any service club to apply for that? Because there's a fair bit of money that could be raised for the club who does that. And was any other clubs given the opportunity last year? Will the clubs be given an opportunity this year for, or you just go, someone's got to allocate it to someone?
My understanding, Councillor Kemp, was that that was done through the touring company itself. It wasn't a council. It wasn't something that the council did, that the actual organisers of the event negotiated with the Rotary Club around that. So
Okay.
you'd need to ask them.
Yeah,
Don't
fine.
know.
I wasn't quite sure.
Yep.
That's why I've
Yeah, that wasn't a council.
saw the statement in the document here, and I thought it must have been the council involvement if they mentioned it. Let's see, there's no, but that's about it. I think again, this is just another opportunity to showcase Victor Harbour and to look at the aspects of what we can provide. I'm still not quite sure whether Kent Reserve is the right place for it because of the dust problem, and there's no irrigation systems there, and the cost of bringing water in to keep it down compared to other. Is there any provisions, if a question to Mark, if I may, if it gets washed out, it's too wet and sloppy, is there another second venue we can go to which is more stable to take a crowd, depending on our weather patterns?
Yeah, through the mayor. Yes and no is the correct answer. Ultimately, the risk is with the organiser, not actually council's event. So that risk will be borne by them. If it was to get to that, we would need to negotiate pretty quickly on another venue. We have spent quite a number of years talking to this particular touring company about the suitability of sites in Victor Harbour. If push come to shove, they may be forced to move, but that's up to them ultimately. I guess the value of that site, and I think I've referenced in the report, is the picturesque nature of that location and its connection to Granite Island and the bay. That was an overwhelming response from the promoter, the artists, and to a lesser degree the crowd that were there. The recent event, that the site was, and this is why we're seeing 2 applications come through. And you'll note that this one particular one you're considering at the moment is actually only one of its type in the state. So I would probably argue the organisers probably best to tell us whether that's an appropriate site, and I think they're telling us in spades that yes, it is. Events these days have the ability to move anywhere, essentially, by virtue of generators and other provisions on site. So there are no services on that site, or very limited services, and so they've been able to adapt to actually make the site work for their needs. So.
Thank you. Councillor Glasbrook?
Oh, thank you. I was pleased to hear that they're paying their fees and that this time. I think that's appropriate personally. In relation to the $5,000 and the 5,000 in the next one, if that goes ahead, it's $10,000. Would it? What's involved? I know we talked the other day about putting in a sprinkler system and whatever else. Would we be better off putting this $10,000 towards that, and rather than spending this $10,000 and then putting one in anyway later on, or?
It's a good point. We discussed this internally. So I spent some time talking to Scott Pearsons, who's the acting team leader open space. Progressively, the council have been investing in extending the sprinkler services on that site. We talked about it. So for this particular event, it would probably be of marginal value because it won't give the grass enough time to establish and grow. So yes, possibly. In our long-term financial asset management plan, there are intentions to upgrade sites around Victor Harbor. This is not one of those sites. It's in our long-term asset management plan. Kathy probably talked to that in more detail, but this gives the council a chance to have a look at this a bit more holistically. There's no guarantees that after these two events, the organisers will be back. So there's a bit of risk, rushing ahead, ad hoc and rolling out a sprinkler system when, this may not be guaranteed longer term. So I'd probably want to be seeing the organisers have a few more events to start to commit to this site to justify council's expenditure. But the council's within its rights to consider bringing forward those works. The other dilemma is there's actually the water that services that irrigation on the site is actually town supply. So there's a couple of concerns. One is that if we start to really overload the town supply, it might drop the pressure for the residents around it. That's a management issue. We could obviously, this is more a question for our open space team, but how we manage the use of that water. The second is the fact that it's actually not recycled water. And so a longer term solution maybe for that site to actually supply recycled water to that site to reduce the operating costs. We've not had a chance to actually look at holistically, if we do increase the irrigation on that site, what are the ongoing costs of water supply? It's certainly doable, but it's probably I think probably a more strategic question for council to consider.
Thank you. Mark, I wonder whether or not you've considered a dust suppression mat.
Yeah, through the mayor. I guess that's why
can be reused.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of why I think the recommendation is that for dust suppression measures, because if we start to look at this and have more time to look at it, dumping water on that site via a recycled water truck might be the cheapest and simplest solution in the short term. But there may be other options we haven't had a chance to investigate. We only recently got this application for this event, so it's been a bit of a rush exercise to call this special council meeting and get the report done. So we haven't really given due credit to actually exploring all the options for this at this point in time. We kind of felt that this would provide a solution for this particular event coming up and buy a bit of time for the council to consider how best to address this. So yes, that could be a solution, but it would have to be evaluated.
Thank you. Are there any further comments in relation to the recommendations? Braden?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I'll just say quickly, it's very, very exciting. We're getting a few more concerts to Victor Harbor, and I think this is...
You don't even know who Susie Quattro is.
No, I've started listening to her, so just preparing myself, and I recommend others my age potentially as well. If we want more concerts, more groups that probably cater for a wider demographic, it's all about how much support we throw behind these initial concerts. So definitely recommend to the community to get out there and add a bit of Susie Q to your playlist. And but yeah, I think it's great for our town, and it's really exciting to see these come through. So I just want to thank administration for all the work that's gone behind this, and hopefully more to come. Thanks.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak? Councillor Henderson, did you want to close the debate? No, I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's a unanimous decision. Thank you. The next item is very similar, but it relates to the Red Hot Summer Series concert, which is the similar concert we had last time. And once again, I will do the recommendations with 4.2 on block. So that's recommendation 1, 2, 3 and 4. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson again? And seconding that? Thank you, Councillor Mann. Do either of you want to speak to it?
No, thank you, Mayor. I think it's all been said previously.
Thank you. Councillor Mann? No. Does anybody want to speak to it? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, Mayor, I fully support what is here, but I'd also just like to raise on these major event applications that here we are with these major, this is the way we should be dealing with major event applications. And I note that for the Victor Harbour Rotary Art Show, it doesn't work like this. And for giving support, as I say, I fully support what's going on with this event application. I would just like to see that when we have our own people putting on our own events, these ones are going to attract 5,000 patrons to the event. We get about 10,000 in the Rotary Art Show come through. That the processes that we have in terms of pushing the art show to move its location from Holland Reserve to the Soldiers Reserve, the delays that are involved in providing, actual
Councillor
permission.
Robertson, I know what you've got to say is really important, but can we just keep, and we can perhaps talk about it afterwards if people would like to, but if we can just keep the debate on the recommendation, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, I think that I agree with, but at this stage, given that this is coming up, we have 2 of these coming in front of us. The way that we deal with major events, this is the way we should be dealing with it, but we're not doing that in relation to our own major events. So, yep, I fully support what's in here.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else want to have any further commentary? No, in that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. And I think that's the end of our special council meeting at 7:45. Just those 2 items. Thank you very much for staying behind for that. Did you want